Get that patient out before Rex tears through the oxygen line. Colonel Ethan Cole seized the leash with both hands as the white German Shepherd lunged beside bed 12, claws scraping across the tile. A teenage patient recovering from chest surgery lay frozen beneath his blanket. One hard strike against the wheeled oxygen rack could send the cylinder crashing into his bed. "Don't pull him backward," night nurse Claire Bennett said, moving between the dog and the boy. "You're tightening his panic." Ethan planted his boots. "Stay back. He's a military working dog. Then stop treating this like disobedience." Claire did not reach for Rex. She watched him. His ears pinned at each burst of fireworks beyond the ward windows. His gaze kept snapping toward the elevator. His injured rear leg hovered above the floor, while Ethan's shortened leash forced his weight onto it. Rex was not advancing toward the patient. He was trying to escape the sound and pain, but the oxygen rack blocked the only path his training recognized. Another explosion rattled the glass. Rex struck the rack with his shoulder. Metal wheels squealed toward the bed. Claire caught the cylinder by its handle and turned it away without stepping into the dog's reach. "Move the patient now," Ethan ordered. "If we move him suddenly, the bed alarms and the brakes release. That gives Rex 3 more noises and a moving target." The teenager's breathing accelerated. His monitor followed with sharp, uneven tones. Claire lowered her voice. "Noah, look at me. Keep your hands beneath the blanket. Breathe in for 4. Ethan gave the leash another controlled pull. Rex twisted harder, panting through exposed teeth. "I can secure him." "You can overpower him," Claire said. "You can't make him feel safe." The words landed badly. Ethan's jaw locked, but Claire had already noticed the old field harness beneath Rex's medical vest, the empty attachment point where a handler's command lead should have rested, and the way the dog searched past Ethan whenever the fireworks struck. Rex was waiting for an instruction that was not coming. Claire stepped sideways until she stood within his peripheral vision. She kept her shoulders angled, her fingers open, and her breathing slow enough for Noah to follow. "Colonel, loosen 6 inches. "No," Rex's injured leg trembled. The oxygen rack rolled another inch. Noah's heart rate climbed. Claire did not argue. "Then choose which patient you want me to protect." Ethan looked from Rex's paw to the cylinder and finally saw the pattern she had described. He let 6 inches of leash slide through his glove. That small surrender changed everything. Rex stopped fighting the pressure, but he remained trapped inside the noise. Claire raised one hand near her hip. 2 fingers folded toward her palm. Her thumb turned once, precise and nearly invisible. Rex saw it. His mouth closed. His front legs bent. Then the 80-pound military dog lowered himself onto the floor, placing his body between Noah's bed and the windows. The monitor steadied as Noah matched Claire's breathing. No praise followed. Claire crouched only after Rex had settled, checked the injured leg without touching it, then nudged the oxygen rack beyond the sweep of his tail. Ethan slowly released the breath he had been holding. His grip changed first. He stopped using the leash as a restraint and held it as a connection. "That wasn't a hospital command," he said. Claire rose and returned her attention to Noah. "No. But it worked. Rex ignores hand commands from everyone except his assigned handler." Claire's fingers curled against her scrub pocket. For 1 second, the clinical calm left her face, not fear of Ethan, but the pain of having opened a door she had kept shut. Rex watched that hand as though it carried a voice he remembered. Ethan did not ask who she was. The patient still needed them, and the dog's stability could break with the next explosion. Instead, he made a decision that cost him the control he had been protecting since Rex arrived. He unclipped the short restraint lead and offered Claire the longer rehabilitation line. "Until the fireworks stop, you're responsible for keeping him settled." Claire did not take it immediately. Accepting meant exposure. Refusing meant leaving Noah beside a dog no one else could reach. Another distant boom rolled across the base. Rex's ears shifted toward her. Claire closed her hand around the line. Ethan moved the oxygen rack himself and positioned his body between Rex and the corridor, following her earlier instruction without being asked. Claire now had responsibility for both a vulnerable patient and a military dog trained to obey a signal she was never supposed to use again. And Ethan had just placed his partner in the hands of a night nurse he no longer had the luxury of dismissing. How long could borrowed control last? The rehabilitation line tightened across Claire's palm as another firework cracked beyond the windows. Rex remained down, but his attention had shifted from the glass to her hand. When she lowered it, he rose. When her fingers went still, so did he. Noah's monitor had stabilized, yet the teenager needed pain medication and a respiratory assessment before the next nursing round. Claire could not care for him while holding a working dog on constant command. Ethan saw the conflict and reached for the leash. "I'll take him." Rex moved behind Claire's leg, avoiding Ethan's hand without aggression. Ethan stopped rather than pulling. The behavioral change cost him visible effort. "He was transported here after surgery this morning," he said. "He hasn't eaten or let anyone examine the injury since." Claire studied Rex without touching him. His nose tested the air whenever Noah's meal tray shifted. His ears tracked Ethan's voice, but his weight stayed angled away from the colonel. Pain explained the guarded leg. It did not explain why he refused the person beside him. "Set his food near your boots," Claire said. "Not mine." Ethan placed the bowl down and stepped back. Rex looked at Claire instead of the food. She understood what he was asking for, and the answer tightened her throat. The first signal had interrupted panic. A second would establish her as someone he was expected to follow. "If I do this again, he may attach the command to me," she warned. "Then don't." Without food, he can't take the medication prescribed for his leg. Ethan looked toward Noah, who was trying not to cough because each breath pulled at his surgical incision. Keeping Rex in the ward without stabilizing him would endanger the patient again. Removing Rex by force could worsen the injury. The easy options were gone. Ethan picked up the bowl, knelt several feet away, and rested it against his boot as Claire had instructed. "Use what he understands," he said. "I'll accept what comes after." Claire transferred the rehabilitation line into Ethan's open hand. He did not shorten it. That mattered. She positioned herself where Rex could see both of them, then pressed two fingers briefly to the inside of her wrist and turned her palm toward Ethan. Rex's head lifted. Claire pointed, not at the bowl, but at Ethan. Rex crossed the floor in 3 measured steps, stopped beside the colonel, and ate while Ethan kept his hands motionless. Only after several bites did Ethan slide the prescribed tablet into the soft food. Rex swallowed it and remained beside him. The result solved the immediate medical problem, but Claire's hand had begun to tremble. She hid it against her scrub pocket too late. Ethan had seen. "That signal wasn't meant to make him obey you," he said quietly. "It told him to accept another handler." Claire checked Noah's oxygen level rather than answer. Behind her, the bowl scraped clean across the floor. Rex then allowed Ethan to guide him onto a folded blanket, but when the colonel tried to inspect the bandaged leg, the dog turned his face toward Claire and waited. Ethan did not demand another signal. He brought the blanket closer to Noah's bed, passed Claire the medication record, and said, "Show me how to keep him stable without making you do everything." Claire looked at the teenager, then at Rex's guarded leg. Teaching Ethan would protect both of them. It would also require repeating gestures she had spent years refusing to remember. She signed the temporary care entry under her own name, formally accepting responsibility for Rex through the remainder of the night. Ethan added his signature beneath hers. The decision bound them to the same outcome. If Rex deteriorated, Claire's judgment would be questioned. If the dog improved, she would have to explain knowledge no ordinary night nurse should possess. Rex rested his muzzle on Ethan's boot, but his eyes stayed fixed on Claire's hands. Before dawn, she would have to decide whether to preserve the secret or teach Ethan enough to become the person Rex could follow without her. The pulse oximeter slipped from Noah's finger as a low boom rolled across the ward. His oxygen saturation began falling, and the effort to breathe tightened every muscle around his healing chest. Claire had one hand on his shoulder when Rex rose beside Ethan, medicine unfinished, eyes locked on her fingers. She could stabilize Noah herself or preserve the distance she still had from the dog. There was no time to do both. "Colonel, you wanted to learn," Claire said. "Stand where Rex can see your left side." Ethan moved immediately. No argument. No shortened leash. Claire reseated Noah's sensor, elevated the head of the bed, and listened across his back. Air moved on both sides, but each shallow breath ended before his lungs fully expanded. Pain and fear were making him guard the incision. He needed controlled breathing, not another alarm or sudden crowd around his bed. Rex paced once toward Claire, pulling Ethan off balance. "Don't correct him," she said. "Give him a job." Without looking away from Noah, Claire demonstrated the breathing sequence with one hand against her own ribs. With the other, she formed the quiet stay-and-watch signal low beside the mattress. "Copy only the second hand." Ethan reproduced it. His wrist was too rigid. Rex looked past him toward Claire. "Drop your shoulder. Turn your palm 2 degrees inward. Breathe before you ask." Ethan adjusted. Claire covered her signaling hand with Noah's blanket, removing herself as Rex's visual answer. For the first time, the dog had to choose whether Ethan's command carried meaning on its own. Rex's ears shifted. Then he crossed to Ethan's left side and lay down, body facing the corridor while his eyes monitored Noah's bed. The rehabilitation line went slack. Ethan did not reward him with touch or praise. He simply matched Claire's breathing rhythm, holding the signal until Rex lowered his head onto his paws. Claire used that quiet to guide Noah through 5 slow breaths. The monitor climbed steadily. His shoulders softened, and the sharp line around his mouth eased. "That hurts less," he whispered. Claire completed the respiratory assessment, administered his scheduled pain medication, and documented both the desaturation and recovery. Only then did she uncover her hand. Rex stayed with Ethan. The success should have given her relief. Instead, Claire pressed her thumb into the center of her palm as if closing around something that was no longer there. She had not merely controlled Rex. She had taught Ethan how to become understandable to him, and Rex had accepted the change. Ethan released the signal carefully. "Again," he said. Claire shook her head. "Not until he chooses to disengage." Repeating commands after compliance teaches him the first one didn't matter. Ethan absorbed the correction, then sat on the floor rather than calling Rex closer. Minutes passed. Rex finally shifted, placed his muzzle across Ethan's boot, and stopped watching Claire's hands. That was the proof neither man nor dog could fake. Ethan removed his gloves and set them beside the leash. "Give me every gesture he needs for the rest of this shift. I'll handle him while you handle Noah." It was not praise. It was a transfer of labor, trust, and risk. Claire looked toward the medication record bearing both signatures. Teaching Ethan would reduce the immediate danger, but each gesture she gave him would surrender another piece of the private language she had sworn never to use again. Still, Noah needed a nurse whose attention was not divided, and Rex needed a partner who could reach him after dawn. Claire pulled a chair beside Ethan and positioned his fingers with clinical precision. "There are 7 essential commands," she said. "You learn them in order, and you do not improvise." Ethan nodded and placed the rehabilitation line across his open palm. Claire began with the signal for wait. When Rex obeyed Ethan without once looking back at her, the question of whether she could stabilize him was over. By choosing to teach, Claire had made herself responsible for whether Ethan could carry that trust, and for what would happen when the meaning behind those gestures could no longer remain hers alone. "That signal is wrong." Ethan held his hand motionless near his thigh, refusing to complete the sixth command. The fireworks had faded to distant thuds, and Noah slept beneath the steady green pulse of his monitor. Claire studied Ethan's fingers. His form was exact. Rex, however, had backed away from him and fixed his eyes on the exit. "You copied what I showed you," Claire said. "Then why did he react like I ordered him out?" "Because you did." Ethan lowered his hand without repeating the gesture. "You called it release. It is release for most military dogs. Not for Rex." He had noticed the distinction she hoped he would miss. 5 signals had transferred cleanly because they controlled position, focus, and acceptance. The 6th carried history. Rex did not understand it as permission to rest. He understood it as an order to leave someone behind. Ethan set the rehabilitation line on the floor between them. "You said 7 commands. I'm not giving the last 2 until I know what they mean to him." Claire could preserve the secret by ending the lesson, but Ethan would remain unable to guide Rex through the response most likely to surface under pressure. Or she could tell enough truth to make him safe, surrendering the boundary that had protected her civilian life. Rex approached Claire and pressed his nose against her closed hand. She opened it slowly. Resting against her palm was a faded military dog tag she had worn beneath her scrub top. Ethan read the name and service number, then looked at her without reaching for it. "I was attached to Rex's K-9 team as a field medic," Claire said. His assigned handler was Daniel Mercer. Rex's ears lifted at the name. "Daniel changed the release signal during our last deployment. It meant take the protected person and move forward, even if the handler couldn't follow." The dog tag trembled once before Claire closed her fingers around it. "I carried Daniel to extraction. Rex carried the person we had been sent to protect. Daniel didn't survive." The explanation made the gestures simpler, not safer. Ethan now understood why Rex watched Claire's hands and why every command cost her something, but the knowledge also made him responsible for using that language correctly. "Show me the modified signal," he said. "If I teach it, you may need to use it someday. Then I'll carry that decision. You don't know what it asks. I know what happens if Rex needs it and I hesitate." Ethan was no longer demanding proof from her. He was choosing a burden with full knowledge that obedience could separate Rex from the person he most wanted to protect. Claire removed the chain from her neck and placed Daniel's tag in Ethan's palm, giving him the one object Rex associated with the command's meaning. Then she shaped Ethan's fingers, palm outward, 2 fingers lowered, wrist turning toward the protected path rather than away from danger. Ethan practiced once without directing it at Rex. The dog remained beside Claire, alert but calm. "Never use it to test him," she said. "Only when staying would cost a life." Ethan closed his hand around the tag. "And the 7th? Claire looked down at Rex. The final gesture was not an order to leave. It transferred protection from one person to another and made the receiver responsible for everyone the dog abandoned to obey. Teaching it would give Ethan full operational reach. It would also end Claire's ability to pretend the language belonged only to the dead. "Not tonight," she said. Ethan returned the tag instead of pressing her. Then he lifted the rehabilitation line and moved beside Noah's bed, taking the watch position Rex had held earlier. "I'll manage the 6 you gave me. You decide when I've earned the 7th. Claire put the tag back around her neck, but it no longer protected her past. By dawn, she would have to choose whether Ethan could carry the final command, or whether keeping it secret would leave Rex trapped between 2 people he trusted. The ceiling lights blinked once, then vanished beneath the red wash of emergency lamps. Noah's infusion pump changed to battery power, but the ventilation system fell quiet, leaving the ward filled with the thin hum of monitors and rain striking the windows. Ethan rose beside the bed. Backup power should engage in seconds. It did not. Rex lifted his head, nostrils working toward the corridor. Claire checked Noah's monitor, then the portable oxygen cylinder. His readings remained stable, but the battery indicator on the infusion pump gave them less than an hour. A soft chime sounded from the nursing station, an unattended patient location alarm. Room 8, Claire said. Postoperative child. 12 years old. A second alarm followed from the stairwell door. Rex stood and pulled toward it, not in panic this time, but with focused urgency. Ethan gave the wait signal Claire had taught him. Rex stopped, yet his nose stayed pointed at the opening beneath the door. Claire reached the darkened nursing station and checked the paper census kept for power failures. The child from room 8 was missing. Wet marks crossed the floor where rainwater had blown through a service exit earlier in the night, but Rex ignored them. He tested the air again, then looked at Claire's hand. He has her scent, Ethan said. And he wants permission to track. Claire looked back at Noah. Leaving her assigned patient was not an option. Ignoring Rex could cost another child the time needed to find her. You stay with Noah, Ethan said. Tell me what Rex needs. Tracking him from here won't work. Then I'll follow his nose. Claire watched Ethan's hand settle around the rehabilitation line. He knew 6 signals, but not the one that transferred protective responsibility. Without it, Rex might locate the child and still refuse to leave Claire's range, or abandon Ethan at the first reminder of Daniel. Claire had protected the 7th command because teaching it would make the language no longer hers to withhold. The blackout had turned secrecy into a risk someone else would carry. She stepped close enough to shape Ethan's fingers. The 7th signal does not tell Rex who to obey, she said. It tells him whose life becomes the objective. Her thumb guided his palm toward the stairwell, then folded 2 fingers toward his chest before extending them outward. Rex's posture changed immediately. His attention moved from Claire to Ethan, then toward the sealed door. Once you give it, you accept everyone between him and the person he's protecting, Claire said. No shortcuts. No leaving anyone behind. Ethan met her eyes. Including you. Claire released his hand. Especially me. She placed the portable oxygen cylinder within Noah's reach, confirmed the pump battery, and called the neighboring ward through the hardwired emergency phone. A nurse there agreed to watch Noah while Claire accompanied the search. Claire documented the temporary transfer before leaving. In darkness, responsibility still required a name. At the stairwell, Ethan gave the 7th signal. Rex did not look back at Claire. He moved to Ethan's left side, waited for the door, and led them downward. The practical success cut deeper than hesitation ever had. Rex had accepted Ethan as the person carrying Daniel's unfinished duty. Claire no longer possessed the option of taking that trust back. On the basement landing, Rex bypassed the public corridor and stopped at a locked maintenance door. A child's hospital sock lay caught beneath it. Ethan did not force the handle. He handed Claire his flashlight and crouched beside Rex, trusting her judgment instead of taking command by rank. Claire found the manual release behind a wall panel and opened the door. Cold air and the sound of rushing water pushed through the gap. A small voice answered when Claire called. Rex surged forward, but Ethan held the line without dragging him back. Tell me when, he said. The request changed the balance between them. Claire was no longer advising a colonel about his dog. Ethan had placed the search under her operational judgment because her signals, restraint, and choices had earned that authority. She could send them in and accept responsibility for whatever waited beyond the door, or retreat and preserve the last boundary between her nursing life and the role she had buried. Water crept across the landing and covered the toe of her shoe. Claire removed her hospital badge, clipped it securely inside her scrub pocket, and tightened the dog tag beneath her collar. Rex leads, she said. You protect his working side. I reach the child. Ethan shifted the rehabilitation line into his left hand and waited. Claire raised the same hand that had trembled only hours earlier. This time it remained steady as she gave the forward signal. Rex entered the flooded maintenance wing with Ethan beside him, and Claire followed, having surrendered both the final command and her right to claim she was only helping for one night. Cold water shoved around their ankles as Rex stopped so abruptly that the rehabilitation line snapped taut. Beyond him, the maintenance corridor divided around a bank of silent pumps, one passage sloping toward a child's broken sob and the other toward the emergency exit. Claire raised the halt signal before Ethan could advance. Rex obeyed, but his nose pointed toward the voice while his injured rear leg trembled under the current. "She's close," Ethan said. "And the water is getting deeper." Claire swept his flashlight across the walls. A red valve will sat above the flooded floor, and ripples streamed from beneath a warped utility door. The storm runoff had forced water into the service wing. Reaching the child was no longer enough. They needed a route back that Rex could manage while protecting her. Claire pointed to the rising stain along the concrete. "We have minutes before his leg can't push against this current." Ethan shortened the line by one careful loop, not to restrain Rex but to support him. Then he gave the signal for wait exactly as Claire had taught him. Rex held position without looking toward her. Ethan had become understandable to him. Now Claire had to trust what she had created. They followed the child's voice into a narrow equipment room. A 12-year-old girl clung to a pipe above the water, one hospital sock missing and her gown soaked to the waist. Her eyes fixed on Rex. "Don't let him leave me." "He won't," Claire said. She reached the girl, checked her breathing and pupils, then found the problem that made a simple retreat impossible. A fallen metal brace pinned the hem of the gown against the floor. The child was uninjured, but every pull tightened the fabric around her legs. Ethan braced the support while Claire cut the gown free with trauma shears. Rex stood between the girl and the rising water, steady beneath Ethan's silent watch command. The moment the fabric released, a heavy clang rolled through the corridor. The warped utility door had swung shut behind them. Ethan tested it once. Water pressure is holding it closed. A ventilation opening near the ceiling led into the parallel passage, but it was too narrow for either adult. It was wide enough for Rex and the child if she crawled. Claire lifted the girl onto a low cabinet and examined the opening. The emergency exit lay beyond it. Sending the child with Rex offered the safest path. It also required the modified command Daniel had given when remaining together was no longer possible. "I can hold the door while you force a gap," Ethan said. "You take them through. I won't fit. Then I'll stay and you find another route." Claire looked at Rex's shaking leg, then at the child gripping his harness. Ethan was offering to absorb the danger, but his plan divided responsibility without improving the odds. The door needed someone on the valve wheel to reduce the water pressure and someone at the frame to pull it open. Neither could leave until the child was clear. Claire touched Daniel's tag beneath her collar. For one breath, the rush of water became rotor wash, and Rex's waiting silhouette belonged to another night when a wounded man had ordered life to continue without him. She forced the memory back into silence. This child was not an objective on a report. Ethan was not Daniel. Repeating the same choice did not require repeating the same loss. "We both stay," Claire said. "Rex takes her." Ethan's gaze moved to the opening. "He may refuse to leave you. Then you'll have to give the command." The cost settled between them. Claire had taught Ethan the signal, but she had never surrendered the final act of using it when she could not follow. If Rex obeyed, she would lose control over whether their bond ended in separation. If he refused, the child would remain trapped while the water rose. Ethan removed his jacket, wrapped it around the girl, and secured her hands through Rex's harness straps. That was his decision. He would not take Claire's place or overrule her judgment. He would make her plan possible and share its consequence. They lifted the child into the opening. Rex placed his front paws inside, then turned back toward Claire. She gave the forward signal. He did not move. His eyes searched her raised hand for the command she had withheld from the moment they entered. Behind them, water climbed above Claire's knees. Ethan took the rehabilitation line, positioned himself where Rex could see him, and formed the modified gesture with exact, deliberate fingers. Rex remained fixed on Claire. The transfer signal had given Ethan responsibility. Only Claire could now release Rex from protecting her. She gripped the valve wheel and felt the current pull against her legs. "When I turn this, the door may open for only a few seconds," she said. "Get the child out. Then come back for me." Ethan set his shoulder against the frame. "I will." Claire believed him, which made the choice harder, not easier. She had spent years refusing to place another person in the position Daniel had occupied. Now protecting the child required her to accept the other side of his final duty, being the one who stayed while someone trusted carried life forward. Rex waited at the opening, trembling between attachment and command. Claire closed her fingers, then raised them into the one signal that would send him away from her. This time, there would be no safer instruction left to give. The valve wheel resisted with a metallic groan while water climbed against Claire's thighs. She completed the hand signal anyway, palm open, 2 fingers lowered, wrist turning toward the narrow passage and the child secured against Rex's harness. It was the same command Daniel had used to make life move forward without him. This time, Claire chose every inch of it. Rex stared at her. His injured legs shook beneath the current, but he did not enter the opening. Ethan held the rehabilitation line loose in one hand and repeated the transfer signal with the other. He had accepted responsibility for the child. Rex still needed release from his responsibility for Claire. "Protect her," Claire said, holding the gesture steady. "Go." Rex's ears flattened. Then his gaze moved from Claire to the girl gripping his harness. The hesitation left his body. He climbed into the ventilation passage, pulling himself forward despite his injured leg. The child followed close against his back, guided by the harness straps Ethan had secured. Ethan fed out the line without dragging or rushing them. A moment later, the girl's shoes disappeared into the darkness. Rex did not turn around. His tags faded into the rushing water, then stopped beyond the opening as he waited for Ethan's next command. The promise in Claire's signal had been fulfilled. Rex had left her because she asked him to protect someone who still had a way out. The cost struck after obedience, not before. Claire's raised hand fell against the valve wheel. That private language no longer belonged to Daniel's final night or to the grief she had carried alone. Ethan had spoken it. Rex had trusted it. A child now depended on it. Claire could never seal it away again. "She's through," Ethan said after checking the line's remaining length. "Rex has her on the other side." Water surged against the pressure-held door. Claire wrapped both hands around the valve wheel. "Then we open this now." She turned it. The wheel moved half a rotation, redirecting enough water to reduce the pressure on the door. Ethan drove his shoulder into the frame, but the opening reached only a few inches before the current forced it back. Claire's shoes slipped. The wheel began spinning against her palms. Ethan abandoned the door and caught the valve beside her, reversing the pattern they had followed all night. "Keep it steady," he said. "I'll take the frame after you have your footing." He was not rescuing her in place of the child. He was protecting the decision she had already made and ensuring that its price did not become her life. Claire braced one foot against the concrete base and locked the wheel. Ethan returned to the door. The pressure eased. He pulled the frame wide enough to pass through, but instead of leaving, he planted himself across the gap and extended his arm. "You first. The wheel closes if I let go." Ethan studied the pipe above her, the rehabilitation line running through the opening, and the short length of webbing hanging from his belt. He looped the webbing around the wheel spoke and anchored it to the pipe, a simple hold using equipment already on him, enough for seconds, not safety. "Then we use the time your choice bought us." Claire released the wheel. The strap strained. Ethan took her wrist, and she stepped through the gap. He followed as the webbing snapped loose and the door slammed behind them. No second rescue waited beyond it. Rex had already completed the decisive work. At the far end of the parallel corridor, emergency lights spilled through an open exit. The girl sat wrapped in Ethan's jacket, one hand buried in Rex's fur. Rex stood between her and the flooded passage, guarding the life he had been ordered to carry forward. When he saw Claire, his body leaned toward her, but he did not abandon the child. Claire stopped several feet away. Calling him back would have softened her pain, but it would also have interrupted the duty she had given him. She lowered her hand instead. "Finish," she told Ethan. Ethan approached Rex's working side and gave the release to rest signal Claire had taught him. Only then did Rex leave the child. He crossed to Claire, pressed his wet muzzle into her palm, and settled at her feet without a command. Claire crouched and rested her forehead briefly against his. Her breath broke once, quietly, before she steadied it. Ethan knelt beside the girl and checked the harness straps rather than intruding on that moment. The child was cold and frightened, but conscious, breathing evenly, and safely beyond the water. Ethan removed the rehabilitation line from Rex's harness and placed it between himself and Claire, neither claiming it. They had entered with Claire carrying the secret and Ethan carrying doubt. They emerged sharing responsibility for what the signal required. Rex had obeyed Claire's choice, Ethan had honored it instead of overruling it, and the child was alive because neither of them treated trust as ownership. Claire rose with one hand on Rex's shoulder. There was no hidden command left between her and Ethan now, only the human consequence of what she had surrendered, and the question of how they would carry it once the night was over. Red emergency lights spilled across the open exit as water streamed from Rex's coat and pooled beneath the rescued child. Somewhere above them, backup pumps began to hum, but Claire kept two fingers against the girl's wrist until the pulse beneath them settled. Ethan unfolded his jacket around the child's shoulders, then placed his radio within Claire's reach without taking command of the assessment. "Tell them what she needs." Claire reported mild exposure, no visible injury, and stable breathing. When the receiving staff answered, Ethan gave Claire's findings without adding rank, history, or explanation. The girl's safe condition, not Claire's past, became the reason they followed her instructions. As footsteps approached from the upper landing, Rex tried to rise. His injured leg folded slightly, and Claire's hand moved toward the signal that would keep him still. She stopped before forming it. Ethan saw the pause. He lowered himself beside Rex, relaxed his shoulder, and gave the rest command exactly once. Rex settled against his boot. Ethan did not look to Claire for confirmation. He checked the dog's breathing, kept the rehabilitation line loose, and waited. The language she had surrendered was already protecting Rex without requiring her to carry it alone. Claire turned back to the child and wrapped a dry thermal blanket over Ethan's jacket. "Is he leaving?" the girl asked, fingers still tangled in Rex's wet fur. Claire could have called him close and reclaimed the bond that had carried them through the tunnel. Instead, she nodded toward Ethan. "Rex stays until his job is finished." Ethan shifted closer so Rex could remain beside the girl without straining his leg. When the transport chair arrived, he matched Rex's pace to its wheels, preserving the dog's working side and keeping one hand near the child's shoulder. Claire walked on the opposite side, monitoring her patient. No one led alone. At the ward entrance, Noah's monitor remained steady under the temporary nurse's watch. Claire checked him before changing out of her soaked scrub jacket. Ethan stayed in the doorway with Rex rather than following her from bed to bed. He had learned the boundary as carefully as the signals. When Claire returned, he held out the temporary care record she had signed hours earlier. His original incident note was clipped behind it, the report that had questioned her unauthorized handling. He drew one line through the recommendation to remove her from Rex's care, initialed the correction, and wrote that every subsequent decision had been shared under his responsibility. Claire read it in silence. Ethan was not erasing procedure or offering protection she had not requested. He was placing his name beneath the risk he had once left entirely on hers. "I'll complete the report," he said. "You complete your shift." Claire's fingers rested on the paper, then released it. She returned to Noah, adjusted his blanket, and checked the battery status on his infusion pump. Her hands were steady until Rex's tag sounded softly behind her. For a moment, her thumb pressed against the dog tag beneath her collar. Then she let it fall. Ethan brought Rex's folded blanket beside Noah's bed and waited for Claire to decide the distance. She pointed to the clear space between the oxygen rack and the doorway. Ethan positioned the blanket there, safely beyond the equipment, and gave the rest command. Rex lay down facing both patients. Claire placed the rehabilitation line in Ethan's hand rather than setting it between them. He accepted it without closing his fist around it. Near dawn, Noah opened his eyes and found Rex keeping watch. His breathing slowed before Claire touched the monitor. Ethan noticed and lowered the corridor lights, carrying forward her standard of removing pressure before demanding compliance. Claire pulled a chair between the two beds, close enough to care for either patient but no longer alone at the center of every responsibility. Rex rested his muzzle on Ethan's boot while one paw remained angled toward Claire. The bond had not been taken from her. It had become wide enough to hold someone else, and Ethan's quiet grip on the loose line showed what he intended to do with his share. The rehabilitation line slid an inch across Ethan's open palm when Noah shifted beneath his blanket. Rex lifted his head, but Ethan did not tighten his grip. Instead, he checked the teenager's face, saw the quickening breath, and dimmed the bedside screen before its light could sharpen the fear. Claire watched from the chair between the beds. No instruction was needed. Ethan lowered one shoulder, slowed his breathing, and formed the quiet signal near his thigh. Rex rose carefully from the blanket and looked toward Claire. Months of solitude seemed to gather inside that single pause, the instinct to reclaim the private language, the bond, and the responsibility before anyone else could carry them incorrectly. Claire kept both hands resting in her lap. Rex turned back to Ethan. At the colonel's signal, the white German shepherd crossed the small space and settled beside Noah's bed, close enough for the teenager to reach him without pulling against his incision. Noah placed 2 fingers against Rex's fur. His shoulders loosened. The monitor's rhythm steadied. Ethan remained on the floor beside them, holding the line as lightly as Claire had taught him, asking nothing from the dog that calm had already achieved. Across the ward, the rescued 12-year-old sat wrapped in a fresh blanket while waiting to return to her room. Rex's working vest lay beside her chair, still damp from the tunnel. She carefully straightened its twisted strap, then left it within Ethan's reach rather than trying to call the dog away from Noah. The protection she had received was becoming patience for someone else. Claire rose to finish her final checks. At Noah's bedside, she confirmed his oxygen level and adjusted the blanket near his shoulder. When she reached for the rehabilitation line out of habit, her fingers stopped above Ethan's hand. At the beginning of the night, taking it back would have meant safety. It would have restored the familiar arrangement in which every hard choice belonged to her alone. Ethan turned his palm upward and offered it without speaking. Claire did not take the line. She placed Daniel's faded tag beside Ethan's open hand for one quiet moment, not surrendering it, but no longer hiding it beneath her collar. Then she closed his fingers gently around the loose line and returned the tag to her neck. The gesture left the memory with her while allowing its duty to live beyond her. Ethan shifted his chair closer to the space between both beds, neither replacing Claire nor waiting for her to direct him. Claire sat beside him instead of across from him. Their shoulders did not touch, but the guarded distance that had defined the night was gone. Rex rested one paw near Claire's shoe while keeping his muzzle beside Noah's hand. The dog belonged to neither trust alone. When daylight began softening the dark windows, Noah stirred again. Ethan raised the one secret signal, calm and exact. Rex settled more deeply beside the boy without looking to Claire for permission. This time, Claire did not hide her hands, correct the gesture, or brace for the memory attached to it. She leaned back in the shared silence and let someone else keep watch.